Hey buddies, I'm back again, and today some content with some stepbrothers in arms. The fiery and beefy boys, which can help doing all the content, making this stuff a pretty walking simulator. We are based on stacking golems and utilizing the Infernal Legion through the helmet, the updated Zov's helmet. But if you are lucky, you can have even more level Infernal Legion from the Forbidden Shako, but it can be sometimes very expensive. Sometimes we are stuck in the X, so we tell our stepbrothers that we are stuck. Um, there is lack of clearance in some beefy packs, in some juiced maps like this. It's double beyond with some bad modifiers, and here I come to a conclusion that we need some explosions, we need some more movement speed on our minions, maybe on our rings and on our wand. Um, all in all, the convocation does its job, but the better movement speed will result in better clearing. I mean that although this build has a budget maybe of 3 divines, if we do not take into the account the Amanamus Gaze jewel, but the price for it varies from league to league, so I don't think it would be the problem. And maybe I'm considering this build like a league starter, as the Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame modifiers that I use here for Wither from the Occultist are not mandatory, and we can apply Withered just with any of skills. We can just take Barrage with the support and to help our minions kill the bosses. And here I've chosen the Drox fight to show all the downsides of this build. The damage here is just the testing variant, so it's not very big. In good situations, we have 2 million burning damage per summoned golem, and we have 6, and it results in 12 million DPS. But the AoE of this skill, the Infernal Legion support, is not that big, and that's why such fights. There are not many fights that you need to target multiple enemies, but here at Drox, when you need to target the banners and you need to spam the signal prey on these banners and on the Drox himself, so it's very annoying. But all in all, you see the good tankiness and the survivability of the minions and how all the fights will be in long-term perspective. So we are just running around spamming the mark. And let's get down to the guide itself. You see on the screen our fiery beefy boys. We have only 6 because I've calculated that utilizing the amulet would result in 3 more minions, but the overall damage will be less. That's why I decided to have only 6 minions here, and in the best variant I'll link 2 POBs, one the actual one, the very cheap, and the second one will be with semi-min-maxed version with 12 million burning damage. And here we are. We are Elementalist with golem skills, Elemental and Leech of the Primordial. The Mastermind of Discord makes our exposure even more effective, and we apply exposure through Wave of Conviction, and we use Shaper of Storms. But if you have the ability to chance to shock somewhere on the tree, you can take Shaper of Winter, and you have the ability to make one more ailment on their enemies. And as we are using the Yoke of Suffering, it's 5 more damage for each ailment we inflict on the enemies, so we make them chilled, shocked, and ignited. That's result in 15% increased damage taken, also some corruption, because the amulet itself without the corruption costs 1 chaos. We get some fancy corruption with +1 to maximum resistances, and also anointed Whispers of Doom, as we utilize 2 curses, and the curses are Elemental Weakness and Flammability to lower the fire resistance of the enemies, and we lower them by using Wave of Conviction. Where is it? Wave of Conviction, Overcharge Support, Combustion, Convocation, and here I could have Calling Strike, but I didn't want to mess with some colors of the sockets, and this setup with Overcharge, Combustion, Unbound Elements just helps us with shocking enemies, and the more we shock enemies, the more burning damage they get from our minions. We get this from the Formless Inferno, and we use Anomalous Meat Shield, Anomalous Predator, Awakened Minion Damage, and Summon Stone Golem. You can choose any kind of golems you want, but as the modifiers on damage, attack speed, cast speed, and etc. Do not affect the damage of the skill, I decided to use some defensive golem. And there are only 2 defensive golems, Summon Stone Golem and Chaos Golem. As we have 100% physical damage taken as the element, with Dawnbreaker, with Lightning Coil, with some Watcher's Eye, using Purity of Elements and Purity of Fire, we don't need physical damage reduction. That's why I use Stone Golem for some additional regeneration. As for the rings, we would like to have just basic rings with resistances and life regeneration, and also to make our build smoother, we need 1 ring with Ele Weakness on hit and 1 ring with Flammability on hit. Now I self-cast them, and it's not very comfortable on tough packs, because in juicy maps you need to cast twice and then Wave of Conviction, and in the best situation we just run, cast Wave of Conviction, and cast Convocation to resummon our units, our minions, near ourselves. Just basic Lightning Coil for Fizz taken as, but if you choose another way to mitigate physical damage, maybe some armor stacking and etc., you can use any body armor, and you can just slightly change the build. For the gloves, the Abhorrent Interrogation for additional elemental damage taken by enemies for our withered stacks, and what helps us inflict withered is the Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh for withering presence from the Occultist. Dawnbreaker, but you can swap it for any shield or maybe another wand for some increased damage. But I've chosen the path of Fizz taken as elemental. That's why I need this shield. It's not. It's just an option. As there are not many sources of increasing the damage for our minions except the minion damage and the damage taken by the enemies, so we need some sources of damage taken, and this is the aspect of the spider, which allow us to inflict spider webs and an additional spider web, which result in 20% more damage all in all. We use Darkness Enthroned with jewels for avoiding bleeding, avoiding being poisoned, and we have other Ghastly Eye jewels with the stats to be immune to bleeding, poison. Also we are immune to elemental ailments, and etc. And we want minions deal increased damage if you used a minion skill recently, and we always use Convocation, and it's the minion skill, so we always have this increase. Flasks are up to you, so I've chosen some movement speed, 2 life flasks just for sustain, because we have regen, but it's not that great. The Cinder Swallow Urn for some regeneration and increased damage taken by the enemies, and the Ruby Flask as we are taking some portion of physical damage as fire and some elemental damage as fire. That's why I've chosen this path. And pretty basic wand with the synthesized minion deal increased damage, and I just spent essence with minion deal increased damage modifier, and crafted there the aspect of the spider skill. That's why we have pretty much increased damage, minion increased damage, and aspect of the spider for our venomous spinnerets. And we reserve for our auras the malevolence, purity of fire, purity of elements, and the aspect of the spider with the enlighten. We are pretty good with our mana reservation. A custom death portal, it's my favorite. Links, steel skin on movement button, flame dash, calm strike, flammability and weakness. As I said, it's better to have them on the rings, or maybe just use Wave Conviction Hex Touch with these 2 hexes, but I don't think it's worth the damage reduction it causes. And for the links, I think that's all. Let's make a quick overview of the tree. We just grab all the reservation, life, and minion damage nodes that we can find on the tree, some regeneration, and use Ghostly Eye jewels to utilize our Amanamus Gaze, but for the cheap version it's just an option if you don't have enough currency to afford it. And Watcher's Eye with fees taken as fire, well affected by purity of fire and purity of elements, as I've said before. Some golem modifiers with jewels like Primordial Harmony, the Anima Stone, and another Primordial Harmony to have our cap of 6 golems. We could use the amulet for another additional 3 golems, but it's not worth that because it has the modifier golems deal 40% less damage, and all in all, when you calculate, the damage is worse for the 9 golems than for 6. It's not the finished build, but you can mess around with it. Even you can leak start it, because you can find any essence and the convocation wand in the first days of the leak. The rings are basic. Yoke of Suffering is pretty affordable. Formless Inferno, I think, will be for the first days of the leak, and etc. So like, subscribe, don't forget to leave your comments in the commentary section, and see you next time. Goodbye.